Hi, this is Lucia Lockmeyer, and I'll be narrating Chapter 8, Thesis Statements, Part 2. How can I create a thesis? How can I revise and strengthen a thesis? How do I know where to put a thesis? How can I create a thesis? Use this 7-step process. Step 1. Brainstorm topics. Here are some questions that could help you. What in the text inspired, confused, angered, excited, annoyed, and/or surprised you? What in the text was important for you to understand or you feel others should be aware of? What does the prompt or assignment ask you to focus on and explore? Step 2. Select a topic. Choose one of the topics that most interests you and you want to explore further. Step 3. Create complex questions about your topic. Create complex questions to be answered with opinion, not facts or yes/no answers. Here are some question formats that could help you. How is this topic connected to some kind of outside issue? How do the flaws in the author's argument on the topic result in some kind of outcome? What angles on this topic have been overlooked? How can we apply the information about this topic? How did or will some kind of effect occur because of or what happened with this topic? How can some kind of problem be addressed or changed for this topic? Step 4. Answer your best question with your opinion. This creates a rough thesis statement. Step 5. Ask yourself, so what? So what is the importance or impact or why one should be concerned? This strengthens and deepens your thesis statement. Step 6. Using your answer with its significance, write a 1 to 2 sentence thesis statement. This refines and focuses your thesis statement. Step 7. Test the thesis by seeing if you can gather good evidence to support it. Go through the main text that you are writing on and list all the passages using page numbers that directly prove and/or illustrate your argument. List potential outside evidence such as research, outside sources, real-life examples, personal knowledge, personal examples that could possibly further prove and/or illustrate your argument. If you cannot find strong or sufficient evidence, then rethink your thesis statement. Example. Here's an example using narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. Step 1. Brainstorming the topics. You could talk about forbidden to read or write, or the abuse of power, or slavery turning good people bad, or education and slavery being incompatible, dehumanization, impressive determination, rights to freedom, slavery is indefensible. Step 2. Selecting a topic, reading and writing as dangerous. Step 3. Creating the complex questions about your topic. So, how is control of human beings connected to writing and reading? Why were the slaveholders so fearful of slaves learning to read and write? When has reading led to violence and uprising? What about becoming educated leads to Douglass's despair? Step 4. Answer your best question with your opinion. How is control of human beings connected to reading and writing? Slaves were controlled by not being able to read and write because they could not learn by reading the arguments and experiences of others and from history what is fair, just, and reasonable, and what is not. Step 5. Asking yourself, so what? So what? We should be concerned because in certain parts of the world today, what the public can read and write is controlled, and as a result, the rights of the people are violated, and they are powerless or ignorant of this. So using the answer with its significance, write a 1 to 2 sentence thesis statement. This refines and focuses your thesis statement. The control and limitations over reading and writing during slavery sought to make slaves like Douglass ignorant, powerless, and more easily controlled, and this control over literacy and education is still happening in the world today. Step 7. Test the thesis by seeing if you can gather good evidence to support it. Douglass discovers that education and slavery were incompatible with each other, page 1. On page 2, it describes how Douglass read in the Columbian Orator how a slave used logic and persuasive arguments so well that his master freed him, shows education can lead to change, and so on. List potential outside evidence, such as research, outside sources, real-life examples, personal knowledge, personal examples that could possibly further prove and/or illustrate your argument. You could use Mukhtar Mai in her memoir, In the Name of Honor. Alex Jones, Losing the News, The Future of the News That Feeds Democracy, and Jonathan Kozol's Savage Inequalities. Pause here and do the practice. How can I revise and strengthen a thesis? Changing ineffective thesis statements to effective ones. A strong thesis statement takes a stand. Your thesis needs to show your conclusions about a subject. Weak thesis. Douglas makes the interesting point that there are some negative and positive aspects to reading. This is a weak thesis statement. It fails to take a stand, and the words interesting and negative and positive aspects are vague. 2. A strong thesis statement justifies discussion. Your thesis should indicate the point of the discussion. Weak thesis. Christians practice slavery in the United States. This is a weak thesis statement because it merely states a fact, so your reader won't be able to tell the point of the statement. Pause here and do the practice. Answers. Possible answers. Changing ineffective thesis statements to effective ones. A strong thesis statement takes a stand. So a stronger thesis would have been, Douglas shows how becoming educated makes it intolerable to live in slavery, revealing how lack of education can lead to submissiveness. This is a strong thesis because it takes a stand and because it's specific. 2. A strong thesis statement justifies discussion. A stronger thesis would be, Christians who practice slavery or who continue to support any law that denies others equal rights violate the basic tenets of the Bible and its teachings of humanity and kindness. This is a strong thesis because it is controversial. This is a good strategy for creating a strong thesis. Readers will be interested in reading the rest of the essay to see how you support your point. Pause here and do the practice. Changing ineffective thesis statements to effective ones. 3. A strong thesis statement expresses one main idea. Readers need to be able to see that your paper has one main point. If your thesis statement expresses more than one idea, then you might confuse your readers about the subject of your paper. Weak thesis. People should not follow unjust laws, and showing strong determination is what helped Douglas to be successful. This is a weak thesis statement because the reader can't decide whether the paper is about unjust laws or strong determination. To revise the thesis, the relationship between the two ideas needs to become clearer. 4. A strong thesis statement is specific. A thesis statement should show exactly what your paper will be about and will help you keep your paper to a manageable topic. Weak thesis. Slavery in the United States damaged many lives. This is a weak thesis statement for two reasons. First, slavery can't be discussed thoroughly in a short essay. Second, damaged is vague and many lives is very general. You should be able to identify specific causes and effects. Pause here and do the practice. Answers. Here's some possible answers. 3. A strong thesis statement expresses one main idea. A stronger thesis would be, through Douglas's own story of strong determination and perseverance, he leaves no room for doubt that one should break the law if it is unjust. This is a strong thesis because it shows that the two ideas are related. Hint, a great many clear and engaging thesis statements contain words like because, since, so, although, through, unless, and however. 4. A strong thesis statement is specific. So a stronger thesis would have been, Douglas's narrative reveals how slavery in the U.S. not only damaged the psyche of the slaves, but destroyed the humanity of the slave owners. This is a strong thesis statement because it narrows the subject to make it more specific and manageable, and it also names who was affected rather than the vague, damaged many lives. How do I know where to put a thesis? Research shows that you comprehend better when the thesis is directly stated, particularly when it is stated at the beginning of an essay. Such an initial thesis statement offers a signpost briefing you on what to expect and overviews the author's message. Unfortunately, writers do not always follow this pattern. In a research study using psychology texts, the main idea was clearly stated in only 58% of the sampled paragraphs. Thus, you should be skilled in identifying stated and implied thesis statements. Locations for stated thesis statements. An introductory statement of the thesis is given at the beginning of the paragraph, so it's at the base of the upside-down triangle where the context comes afterwards. A concluding statement of the thesis appears at the end of the paragraph, so there's context first and the thesis at the end. So the context comes before and after the thesis in the middle of that diamond-shaped example. Both the introductory and concluding sentences state the thesis. So you start with the thesis, give some context, and end with the thesis. For implied thesis statements, the details are combined to make a point, but the thesis is not directly stated, so it is only context within the box. Pause here and do the practice. Locating thesis statements. Don't meddle with old unloaded firearms. They are the most deadly and unerring things ever created. You don't have to take any pains with them at all. You don't have to have a rest. You don't have to have any sights on the gun. You don't have to take aim even. No, you just pick out a relative and bang away, and you are sure to get 'em. A youth who can't hit a cathedral at 30 yards with a Gatling gun in 3/4 of an hour can take up an old empty musket and bag his grandmother every time at 100. Mark Twain, Advice to Youth. In The Oracles, My Filipino Grandparents in America, Pati Poblete gives her account as a young girl growing up in America being raised by her culturally foreign grandparents, and the results reverberate with her well into her adult years. Her parents, on the other hand, play a deafeningly silent role throughout the upbringing of Pati. The failure of Pati's parents to provide her with guidance, attention, and to control her exposure to popular media at a young age prevent her from having a healthy relationship with her grandparents and a healthy identity. Ron Taffel, a child-rearing expert, advised, "Even as kids reach adolescence, they need more than ever for us to watch over them. Adolescence is not about letting go. It's about hanging on during a very bumpy ride." Pati unfortunately didn't have the support, so seemed to hit every bump. Student paper on Pati Poblete's The Oracles, My Filipino Grandparents in America. So which ones are they? Pause here and do the practice. Answers. Don't meddle with old unloaded firearms. They are the most deadly and unerring things ever created. That is where the thesis comes at the very beginning. For the second one, it comes in the middle. Details are placed at the beginning and end to arouse interest with the statement of the thesis in the middle of the paragraph. Pause here and do the practice. In the 1940s, George Orwell warned, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." Orwell, page 30. In the 1990s, a band called Rage Against the Machine, the name itself referring to a people's movement to fight against control, corporation, government, or otherwise, used this mantra in their song Testify, a warning to not silently endure oppression, Rage Against the Machine. This warning is not only relevant to the 20th century, but has been applicable since human beings started forming structures of power to control and oppress one another. This can vividly be seen during the times of slavery in the United States, when blacks were enslaved for 2.5 centuries. In Frederick Douglass's novel, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, Douglass reveals how this long and brutal control of human beings was partly accomplished through control over literacy. The control and limitations over reading and writing during slavery sought to make slaves like Douglass ignorant, powerless, and therefore more easily controlled. And this control over literacy and education is still happening in the world today. Sample essay on Frederick Douglass's Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. Pause here and do the practice. Answers. The thesis comes at the end. The control and limitations over reading and writing during slavery sought to make slaves like Douglass ignorant, powerless, and therefore more easily controlled, and this control over literacy and education is still happening in the world today. Practice. A TV set stood close to a wall in a small living room crowded with an assortment of chairs and tables. An aquarium crowded the mantelpiece of a fake fireplace. A lighted bulb inside the tank showed many colored fish swimming about in a haze of fish food. Some of it lay scattered on the edge of the shelf. The carpet underneath was a sodden black. Old magazines and tabloids lay just about everywhere. Bienvenidos Santos, Immigration Blues. Pause here and do the practice. Answer. This is an implied thesis. The details combine to make a point, but the thesis is not directly stated. That concludes Part 2 of Chapter 8, Thesis Statements.